Yeah, here it is. This needs absolutely no introduction, but for those of you that do not know, this is the Alpha Model's Ferrari F8 Tributo. If you're curious, Tributo is Italian for tribute. This is the 8th generation Ferrari, and it is to pay homage to 45 years of the mid-engine layout that they are so well known for. There is a whole lot in this box, so I'm going to go off camera here, get it all unwrapped, and we'll look at it all a little bit closer. At least that was the plan. Guys, I gotta show you, this thing is in 3 layers of bubble wrap. As annoying as this was to get unwrapped, I do have to give Alpha Models credit for taking such good care of this. You guys know what shipping is like today. This made it all the way from China without a single scratch on it. Alrighty, so what are we looking at here? This is my first Alpha Model kit, so I'm going into this blind. I really have no idea what to expect. And as I had mentioned in the sneak peek video about a week ago, this thing is heavy. It really is just a solid chunk of resin. And I really like to see a big gaping hole for the mirrors. I really do. You guys know me, you watched any of my builds, I will always drill those out and pin them. And that is because most manufacturers, well, they do not have a way to positively locate the mirrors. Aside from that, all the vents, the holes, and the openings are all molded closed. If you guys look at the real car, you can't really see anything behind the mesh anyway, and we have photo-etch to dress it up, so this is still going to look good. Now, to kind of prepare myself for this, I watched a few other builders build their Alpha Models kit, and the biggest complaint is the panel lines. So either Alpha Models listen to them, or those people just want to complain, but these panel lines are nice and deep. And as far as the interior tub goes, thank you for giving us a separate center console. And behind that, we have a flat area with a whole bunch of locating tabs, which leads me to believe we're going to have an engine to look through on that back window. Now, the chassis pan, or the floor, whatever you guys want to call this thing, for being a chunk of resin, it is super flat. Well, as flat as I could look at it anyways, due to the fact that it's got all these fins and everything down below it. And looking at these holes here, it looks like this is all just going to kind of screw together like your typical curbside kit. Alright, so back to the body. I still cannot get over just how heavy this thing is. We got some positive locating areas for all the windows here. It's also going to make it nice and easy to mask off. So as I stated earlier, this is my first Alpha Models kit. I really had no idea what to expect when I started unwrapping this thing. I haven't even built this thing yet, and I just gotta say, comparing it to some Aoshima, Fujimi, Tamiya kits, this is one of the cleanest molds or casts that I have ever dealt with. They really do take some pride in this, and I'm not just saying that because they gave it to me for free, but guys, I'm really impressed. I really want to hold with judgment until I get it completely built, but from the way it's looking, if you guys could afford one of these, it's really worth the money. And I really cannot wait to get in my stable Ferraris back there. Alright, so the first sprue, if so to speak, is really just a bag of parts. So let's see what we got here. Now first we're going to look at the rear calipers. I'm going to zoom in here just so you guys can see the level of detail that they had put into this. Now all these dust extraction ports and the cooling vents, they are all molded open actually, guys. Now these tabs on the bottom, they're supposed to be there to locate these on the spindles. But they really took their time to make sure all the pour spouts are well hidden and in a place you could cut them off and nobody will know that they were there. And I am not really sure what a lot of these parts are though, but it looks like various interior bits. Yeah, we can't make any of this out. Let's zoom back in here. Now in this piece here, I had to look at the instructions, but this appears to be the rear bumper brace. Now next up, we have the bottom portion of the center console. Now these smaller rotors here, these are going to be for the rear brakes. This next piece here, this is the overhead console with the rear view mirror. And I have no idea what that round thing is. All I know is it's part 59. Now these pieces here, obviously these are going to be our exhaust tips. And just look at how thin they got that resin, guys. These people really know what they're doing. This is going to be the top half of the center console. Now, I was going to kind of try to mock it up here, but I forgot it's got that pour spout molded into it. And finally in this bag we have the front rotors. Now even though we have photo etch, these things are nice enough we could just detail paint them and they would look every bit the part. And I just got to go back and show you guys just how thin this resin is. That is like machine to turn aluminium kind of thin. In the next bag here, we're going to start off with the AC and heater vents for the dashboard. Now, obviously this is the steering column and a steering wheel. Now there's a lot of small little fiddly bits inside that steering wheel. Luckily we have decals for all of it. Now these little guys here, it's hard to tell, but there's some mesh kind of molded into them. These are going to be the speakers that fit down inside the door card here. Now thankfully all the parts that are a different color, they were molded separately. Just makes detail painting so much easier. And these speakers are going to fit in that recess just like so. Now next up we have the door pools. They're also a separate part and they're going to slot in just like those speakers. Alpha models, they really thought ahead and they made this super easy for us to put all this together. Now next up, these thin little slits, these are the headlights. After that, we're going to have the little vent things that surround the exhaust tips. Now for a part that is supposed to be hollow for the photo etch, that's some pretty thick resin. It took me a little while to figure out what this guy is, but this is actually the oil fill in the oil sump. Now this, obviously, it's a valve cover with the coils built into it. Now Ferrari, they're kind of straying away from their roots. These valve covers are the only red on this entire engine. And this little guy right here, this is going to be the timing chain covers that goes on the front of the engine. These are the side view mirrors. If you remember a bit ago when we were looking at the body and I made note of the huge gaping holes in the doors, these things will positively fit into place with zero chance of play or misalignment or anything. That is why on my other builds, you guys will see me drill and pin for the mirrors. Now what they're doing here is the same in theory, but instead of using a metal pin, they just gave us a whole lot of extra material. This big guy right here, this is going to be the deck lid. After that, we're going to get into some of the engine detail. Yes, guys, this thing has an engine, kind of. This is the intake manifold. This is a curbside kit, yes, but we got that big back window and it's got to look in to see something. So what we do have is just the top half of the engine. And in that same fashion, this is our air cleaner and intake ducts. I do not really remember what I was pointing at here, but this is the bottom half of the dashboard. Next up, we have the top half of the engine block. This is going to hold all of our engine bits in place. And of course, Ferrari, they always put the oil filter at the top of the engine, so when you change the oil, it gets everywhere. Now we're going to talk about this piece here in just a minute, since it is one of two, and you got to see both of them for it to make sense. You got some more top halves of things. This is the top half of the transaxle. These are the spindles. If you guys remember when I was talking about the calipers earlier, they had those little notches, the cutouts to hold them in place. Alrighty, so we're finally made it to this piece. If you guys remember a second ago, I just said you gotta see both of them to make sense. These are what are essentially the inner fenders for the back of the car. The engine, it's got kind of this shroud thing going all around it. The shroud sits on top of those and it just kind of ties everything together. This bag is different than all the other bags. Interesting. This big piece of resin right here, this is the rear diffuser. Not only is the detail amazing, but just look at how thin these fins are. A bit ago I just talked about a shroud surrounding the engine. This is that piece. I don't know its legal name, but I'm just going to call it a shroud. This section here, this is the back of the passenger compartment. It's got little notches and cutouts for seat belts. They do not go very deep, and it's some super thick resins. I don't know how I'm going to attach the seat belts. I'll probably just drill it out. Yeah, that seems easy. Finally, we're going to have the top half of the dashboard. And again, we're going to have some super thin resin here. This is so thin that it is almost see-through. And the defrost vents, they are super deep. That is the most realistic defroster I've ever seen, really. And finally, for this bag, we have our seats. I would have liked to have seen these in two different parts just to make masking and painting easier. But hey, I could make do. Now do take note that these are handed. There is a definite left and a definite right. It's really easy to tell what goes where because only one side has moldings for the seat belts. Now this definitely probably would have been easier to cast these in two pieces. Look at that undercut on the seat right there, guys. I want to see what the mold for these looks like. So I've been on Ferrari's website playing with the configurer for this car. If I remember right, there's something like 47 different seat options that could have gone in this car. This next bag's got quite the menagerie of parts in it. We're first going to look at the windshield wipers. I hate photo-etch wipers, so you guys have no idea how happy I was to see these molded in resin. Score. They are kind of some complex shapes, so I don't think we could have got away with photo-etch on these anyway. Yeah, maybe this one. Now next up we have one of our taillights. Remember, this thing has 4 taillights. That is one of the styling cues that did not carry over from the 488. If you're not familiar, the 458 and the 488, they had just one taillight. I guess technically they had 2, one on each side. Look at the clarity on these things, you guys. These things are actually better than your typical kit clear parts. And these hollow tubes, these are going to be like, I guess the barrel of the tail lights. I'm not really sure what to call that part, but if you guys look at the tail lights on a real car, they're extremely intricate. And I do apologize if me showing you the same part over and over is getting kind of redundant. I'm also using this time to inspect them. But yeah, here's a nice change of pace. This is going to be the headlight lens. And again, extreme clarity. There's no distortion. There's no magnification. Just an extremely clear and perfect casting. You know, on clear parts, there is zero room for error. This tiny fiddly little thing right here, this is going to be our third brake light. And here we have 2 more, the inner tail lights and then the actual headlights themselves. I'm glad they gave us an extra, because I have a feeling I'm going to lose those fiddly little things. And I know at least 2, maybe 3 of these are the side markers. The other ones, I haven't the slightest clue. And I hope none of you need me to tell you what these are. They are, of course, staggered, just like on the real car. If we look really close here, we can even see some branding. It's hard to tell, but these are actually Michelin tires. And just the attention to detail here, man. Even on the inside, the back of the spokes, look how clean that is cast. They had even nailed the tread pattern, man, especially on this low profile of a tire. And I didn't notice it at the time, but they even have different offsets here. On the front wheel, the hub sits further outwards. That is just an insane attention to detail. Now I am curious if they did that on purpose, or the 3D master, all they did was take and just widen the wheel and it just happened naturally. The contents of this next bag, well, they're kind of interesting to say the least. Well, not these. You guys probably know what these are. In addition to the cast exhaust tips, they also gave us some turned aluminium ones. Now, I assume that's for those of you who want just a natural stainless look, or if you want to paint the other ones up and tarnish them like some burnt titanium. But these white things here, what these are essentially just miniature tooling dies. What you do is you put your corresponding piece of photo etch in there, you mash it down as tight as you can, and it stamps out the photo etch to the contour you need it to be to fit the car. And I will admit, some of my older builds, I just did not use photo etch for something just because I cannot get them to fit the contour of the body. This is a genius idea. Now, oddly enough, guys, I got the instructions right here with the parts call out. These, I don't think they're supposed to be in here. They're not on the parts list anywhere. So for those of you in the know, I actually got two kits from Alpha Models. I got an Aston Martin and this one. And this is why I'm starting the Ferrari first. It actually comes with carbon fiber decals. The Aston Martin's got a lot of carbon fiber too, but I did not see any carbon decals in the box. So I ordered some and they're still on the way. Like 4 weeks now, if I remember right. Just look at these decals though, guys. There was zero decal overhang, you know, that kind of clear edge on them. I mean, look at this thin strip right here in the middle. If I was making my own decals, I would not even have bothered to make that. Now, it's kind of hard to tell, but the pattern, it is directional. You guys know how I like to do, what's Justin call it? Like a bookend carbon or a matchbook carbon, something along those lines. Basically, it's just aligning the pattern in the carbon fiber weave to make everything look proper. And this little cellophane sleeve they gave us was really fighting me. Alright, now next up we have some more clear parts. From what I've been told and my understanding, I am rather spoiled to have gotten these later generation clear parts. Back in the day, all the clear parts were vacuum formed clear plastic. And what that means, you basically just got a piece of plastic roughly in the shape that you needed it, and you had to cut it out and trim it down to make it fit. And if you trim too much, hey, that piece is wasted. You don't have a clear part now. It's also a really nice touch that they already did all the black surrounds. You guys have always seen me make my own masking or use some kit masking to do it and just paint it. Not that it's hard, it's just monotonous. So them going the extra mile doing this for us, that is awesome. And yes, these things do just bend, and then they fit the contour of the body perfectly. Now I have heard some rumors that these things usually come undersized, so guess we'll see. And finally we got one giant stack of photo etch. We got a really nice kind of placard, so to speak, for a display. Yeah, stay tuned, I have an idea floating around in my head. Now these are the seat belts, which I will not be using because I got some actual seatbelt fabric. It's still nice that they gave this to us though, for those of you who don't like to make your own seatbelts, which I do not. Now this looks like that thin strip of carbon fiber I was talking about earlier. Now the rest of this, from what I could see on the instructions book here, they're basically just backing for different decals or lenses. The next thread here, this is just all the braking components. Well, except for the actual rotor itself. This is just a faces for them. You guys remember back in the day when we had to make our own brake rotors just by stacking some sections of photo-etch? Yeah, we don't have to do that anymore. Now what we have is just a resin core, I guess is what you'd call it, that just sandwiches between all this photo-etch. Now Alpha models, they also make the hobby design photo-etch, and from my understanding, the ones with the blue backing paper, they got an adhesive built into them. So these things will stick in place to an extent, nothing though like a full metal transfer that we have here. Now here we do have some generic wiper blades. Here in a minute I'm going to show you guys the next fret, and we can see the actual wiper arms. There is absolutely no way that photo-etch is going to bend out to the complex shape that they have molded for us in that resin. But what am I pointing out there? We got a whole lot of grills, we have the floor mats, and the front rear license plates. Yeah, I think I'm gonna do it. I have a really good idea for this placard thing here. So get excited for that. Yeah, finally, for the last of the actual parts, we have the screws that hold everything together. Now, I'm a little curious why they gave us bulge head screws in here. From my experience, resin doesn't really stretch. It just kind of breaks. So I will be replacing these with some self-tapping machine screws. Who knows though, the body could be threaded for these. I didn't even look, to be honest with you. Now I do know this video is kind of getting long, and we're almost to the end though, I promise you. Now the instruction booklet, it's really just 2 pages. So we're going to go over this real quick because there's not a lot here. Basically, it's just a picture of the part with an arrow pointing to where it goes on the body. And I've always kind of liked these CAD style drawings, man. I don't know why. They just always seem cool to me. We got some nice photo-etch backing here for these decals. You guys know I like to use UV resin to make my own kind of 3D emblems. Having a photo-etch background just makes a good solid base to build those up on. Now I know it doesn't look like a lot at first, but there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are 37 pieces that make up this dashboard here. And lastly, on the back of the little instruction booklet here, we're going to have a complete parts call out. Not including the individual photo etch pieces and each individual decal, there are 97 pieces that make up this kit. Keep in mind though guys, this is a curbside kit with almost 0 chassis decal and as bare minimum of an engine we can get. In most cases, that is still more parts than a full chassis and full engine kit. So again, I just wanted to thank Alpha Models for sponsoring this build. They really took a risk on me, being that I have barely 1,000 subs. I don't get the traffic they're used to, but I'm gonna make sure it pays off for me in the end. So stay tuned, guys.